Swallowtail, Chapter 8. Nana! Hurry up. Let him know you're here. It's going to take more energy now, but you can do it. You mean, like, focus harder? Not exactly, but that'll help. You need to siphon some extra energy to reach them now. You were loaded with it when you first got here, but as your vibration changes, you're going to need more energy to connect with them. Everything's thicker and heavier and slower on the earth plane, kind of like running through mud. Pulling extra energy from things is like putting on monster truck tires. Gives you more traction, more power. That's kind of what Wendy said. You know her, don't you? You betcha. Lots of spunk and cute as the dickens. I remember she said I could pull electricity from things, but how? There's a light on in the bathroom, across the hall. Pull some, from the bulb. It's an easy one for beginners, but I still do it all the time. Not having the first clue how to begin such a bizarre task, Claire gave Nana a worried look. Just pull the energy out of it any way you want. Use your instincts. Quit thinking so much and just try, Nana advised, pointing her toward the bathroom. Hesitant to play with electricity, Claire closed her eyes, held out her hands, and took a deep breath. Finally, she thought, pull! And the second she felt the pleasant tingle surge through her fingers all the way to her toes, she opened her eyes. She could actually see the electricity shooting across the room, her fingertips acting like lightning rods. Claire's entire body tingled like a limb falling asleep. Ironic, since I've definitely never been more awake. She turned and exhaled, enveloping Paul and Anna in a cloud of her lavender soap. She sprinkled it through their hair and into the creases of their clothing. She spun it around them like cotton candy, encircling them in a cool cocoon of her essence. Anna shivered and stared at her dad as the unmistakable scent of her mom's lavender bath soap filled the nostrils. She glanced around the room, but saw nothing unusual, except her dad shaking. Their eyes met briefly. They both glanced toward the bed where her mom's pillow remained tucked beneath the comforter. Her dad turned to face her, took her by the hand, and looked helplessly into her eyes. Something was happening, but she couldn't make sense of it, and from the confused look on his face, neither could he. She kept expecting him to say something, anything. A loud pop came from the bathroom, which was dark by the time they looked to see what it was. "What's going on?" Anna whispered as she latched onto her dad's arm and craned her neck to see into the bathroom, unable to move. "I think the bathroom light burned out," Paul mumbled. It's me, Claire shouted, waving her arms between hugging and kissing them. "Nice work, but they can't hear you very well. Sometimes they can, but your vibration is so much higher and faster that it'll just sound kind of like a hum or a ring in their ear until you really holler at them. You gotta get their attention, though, so go for it," Nana coached from over Claire's shoulder. Claire shouted into Paul's ear, "Paul, get the ring! The ring! Show her the ring!" Nana joined in, "The ring! The ring!" "Ring?" Paul finally muttered to himself. "Yes! Oh my God, yes!" Claire shouted. "Dad?" Claire knew the moment it clicked in his mind by the look on his face. "Your mother bought you a ring for your birthday. I mean, it was going to be from both of us, but I forgot all about it. Your birthday's still a couple weeks away, but you want to open it now?" "Oh my God, yes!" Anna cried. Positively giddy, Claire watched him walk over to her nightstand and open the top drawer. Paul reached way in the back, dug around, and pulled out a pink velvet box. He sat down on the bed and motioned for Anna to join him. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks when Anna took the box in her hand. She sat down next to her father and slowly opened it. "Whoa, real jewelry," she whispered, slipping the ring on her pinky finger. Paul sniffled and smiled. Claire knelt at their feet, clapping. She felt Nana crouch down next to her and pat her on the back. "Look, I did it! She's wearing it!" Claire cried. The ring was a dainty gold band with a pearl in the middle and a tiny diamond on either side of it. Claire had been to 5 different stores before she'd found exactly what she'd wanted. "Yeah, real jewelry. You're not a kid anymore," Paul whispered. Anna leaned over and hugged him. "Thanks, Dad," she said, holding her hand out to admire the ring. Thanks, Mom, she whispered, and looked up toward the ceiling. Claire smiled, but the bittersweetness hit her hard. Great. She finally wants to talk, and now we can't. There are lots of ways you can still communicate, don't worry, Nana reassured her. Claire looked up as Anna turned to say something to Paul, but he was already headed for the door. It's late. I've got to get over to see Grandpa. You want jam? Sure, Anna said cheerfully. But Claire knew that look. Anna's face had dropped. She looked like she'd just missed the most important train of her life, as the entire experience shrank into the distance. She could tell Anna needed Paul to somehow acknowledge what had just happened. But he wasn't ready. He had literally run from the idea. Claire watched her daughter intently as Anna stared at the ring on her finger. She flipped the box open and closed, open and closed. Anna held solid links to her, and nothing could change that. If I just keep doing things like this, giving her tangible signs, eventually she'll understand that I'm okay, right? Claire asked Nana. With a little luck, and Nana answered. But Claire detected a hesitation. Are you sure this is okay? I'm not, ticking off anyone or anything, am I? She stood up to straighten her favorite black and white family photo on the wall, the one where Em had cut her bangs down to the scalp. Claire cringed in anticipation of Nana's answer, since she had no intention of stopping anyway. Still high from making direct contact and not wanting anyone to rain on her parade, Claire thought herself to Em's dollhouse before Nana could reply. She'd been stopping by the dollhouse every day since Nana had first taken her to Em's room. She'd hoped to find Em there, but the room was empty. Nana laughed and shot her a wink when she caught up with her, like it was a game of tag. Claire felt her watchful eyes as she knelt down in front of the dollhouse, reached inside and pulled out a tiny ceramic teapot with a hand-painted blue windmill on it. It was one of the few remaining pieces of a set Nana had given her for Claire's 6th birthday. Tea party? Nana wore a smile, but she had a mischievous look in her eye. It was clearly a loaded question. Before Claire had a chance to answer, Nana took her by the hand. The room went dark. Suddenly, the two of them were seated in the breakfast nook inside the dollhouse. Claire's heart raced. She couldn't speak or breathe. She grabbed the edge of the blue plastic table with both hands. It felt strange and flimsy, but at least it was something to hold on to. Have some chamomile. It'll help you relax, Nana winked as she poured steaming tea from the same pot Claire had just been holding between her thumb and forefinger. Now it was ridiculously oversized, as were the teacups. They looked like mixing bowls. Claire laughed nervously. Slow down, Nana. I have no desire to meet any dolls today. Got it? They're as plastic as this table, Claire. Claire watched her closely as she took a seat across from her and shrunk her teacup down to a more manageable size, simply by rubbing it. She nonchalantly sipped tea from it as Claire's cup began to shrink too. Say when, Nana told her. When? Claire smiled weakly. Nauseous but thankful the tea had shrunk right along with the cup. She tentatively raised it to her lips, blowing on it out of habit, when she noticed a yellow marshmallow peep jammed behind the refrigerator. Claire laughed so hard she had to set her cup down to keep from spilling it. She'd thrown that peep in the wastebasket twice, telling Em she couldn't keep it in there, that it would attract bugs. The last thing they needed was a roach-infested dollhouse, especially from her new perspective. We've got company, Claire said, pointing to the peep. He's never bothered me, Nana giggled. This is too weird, Claire stammered. Went too far, did I? By about a mile, Claire replied. Not Mount Everest, not Paris, but the dollhouse. Oh, goodness, those places are too far. I've got chores. Only because you want them? Claire cut her off. Sorry, I thought this would be fun. I just wanted to remind you that possibilities are endless. Got it. Loud and clear. All I want to do right now is see Paul and the girls. Colin, too. It was uncomfortably dark inside the dollhouse, since the windows were merely decals like the yellowing wallpaper, which also sported giant pieces of Scotch tape in a few places. Tape Claire herself had placed there when she was a girl. This simple fact now boggled her mind, if she thought about it too hard. Claire wished one of M's little battery-powered lights were in the room, but she wasn't about to go searching for them. Instead, she continued to grumpily sip her tea. I really thought you'd like it here. You and this dollhouse go way back. For Pete's sake, you've played with it 1,000,000 times. Not like this, I didn't. This has been, well, interesting, I guess, but seriously, I'd like to go now, Claire said, standing up. She flinched as something caught in her hair. When she looked up at the ceiling, she discovered it was covered in neon smiley face stickers, but she rubbed her arms nervously as if it had been a bat. You asked me if you were pissing off God, Nana reminded her. Something like that? He isn't the white-bittered judge in the sky we make him out to be. What a relief. Can we go now? Claire muttered, walking to the edge of the kitchen and staring in wonder at the enormity of M's room. It was unnerving at best. We feel him here all the time. In the dollhouse, Claire responded dryly, without turning to face her. Sheesh. You're about as pleasant as a rattlesnake with piles. Claire didn't respond. Anyway, here you'll finally start to get that he's actually something so amazing we don't even possess the words to describe him. You can't fully understand him until you grow and let go to join him in that egoless plane. Back up, Claire said, turning on her heel. Did you just say I'll finally start to understand that I can't understand him? I guess I did. Sorry, I just don't want you to be afraid of it, because it's the last thing it wants. What it does want is to flow through you. It's kind of like when you learn to do the back float down in the creek. It's got it got easier once you stopped struggling to float and just relaxed. But you were always more interested in chasing frogs, come to think of it. Claire shook her head. Stop making it sound so easy. It's true. You had to have faith that the water would support you. But first you had to have an interest in being supported. Claire was in no mood for philosophy. She wondered what the other rooms in the dollhouse looked like up close, but didn't want to encourage Nana to take her on any more freaky field trips for a while. She just wanted to be with her family. The word he isn't even close. I'm sure you figured that out. That's just something we stick to him on the other earth plane, try to make sense of it. Do you want a glimpse? Claire frowned and shook her head. I wouldn't have a clue what to do or say. Well, it's not a cheerleading tryout. You don't have to dazzle. He knows you. Every soul's connected to it in the same way. Nobody's closer or farther. Doesn't matter what your beliefs were at that time or any of them. Only the soul can create distance between itself and what you call God. And almost every one of us does at one time or another. Then we just have to learn how to bridge the distance and find our way home again. There are lots of different ways. Nana propped her feet up on the chair across from her and poured herself another cup of tea. A bowl of sugar cubes appeared on the table. Nana picked up 3, dropped 2 in her tea, and popped the last one in her mouth. So what about past lives? Claire ventured, folding her arms, almost afraid to ask. What about him? Well, it says I'm not ready to meet my collective. That my vibration is all screwed up. Honestly, I'm more interested in other things right now, but I do wonder about my past lives. I mean, you always hear about people thinking they were Cleopatra or Napoleon, but the reason I never once went to a psychic was because I was afraid they'd tell me something like, you fed the chickens. Nana sprayed a mouthful of tea across the table in a fit of laughter. Claire couldn't contain her own laughter as she looked around for a towel. She was about to try to manifest a dish rag when Nana cleaned up the mess with a wave of her hand. When their laughter had finally subsided, Nana resumed her tutorial. Somebody had to feed the chickens, right? Chicken farmers have life lessons too. But I don't know. No, I know what you're saying. We all fed the proverbial chickens at some point. There are quieter, resting lives, less eventful than others. Why? People usually live a life like that after one's spent a whole lot of turmoil. Why doesn't everyone just stay here and learn their lessons? Because the lessons you learn on the earth plane are so much more intense, painful and joyful to beat the band. They propel you further in your destiny over a shorter period of time. A speedboat instead of a rowboat. But you always have the option of remaining here to study as long as you like. Claire considered this as she walked back toward the table and stopped. What's the matter, hon? Why don't you ever call it heaven? We are in heaven, right? Well, as long as we're on the subject of chickens, and the word heaven is like saying chicken parts. Stirs up too many questions. Chicken parts gets people thinking beaks and gizzards and turning green. You say heaven, and you get people thinking pearly gates and streets paved in gold and whatever they were brought up on. It all gets in the way of the truth, Anna explained. Claire gave her a painful expression, rubbed her sternum. What's the matter now? It's that pulling sensation again. It's like someone's calling me, but instead of hearing it, I feel it. You mean like, I don't know, say if someone were rubbing the heck out of a necklace with some of your ashes in it? Claire rolled her eyes. Is it okay to answer? Last time it was Anna, but it feels like Paul this time. I can't even tell you why, it just does. Of course, hon. Go ahead, answer it. Just don't stay too long. Make short visits at first. Or things can get messy. Messy how? Just good and messy. Now skedaddle. Claire snuggled up next to Paul in his Honda as he pulled into the driveway of the Elms nursing home. He was clearly depressed. She had to assume she didn't feel drained like before because he was focused on Gus instead of her. Paul killed the engine and rested his head against the back of the seat, gearing up. Claire had seen him do it in this parking lot too many times. He'd say, "That's not him. Just a guy I look after now. Make sure he's got everything he needs." It was a ritual. Paul's gearing up. Next he'd say, "I said my goodbyes that day I found him in the garage." He'd be out there all night. He'd been out there all night. Found him crying in the corner by the circular saw. He had grape popsicles from the old freezer all over his face. Couldn't remember how to get out of the garage. Jesus. How many inches did he rebuild in there? They both knew the story inside and out, but Claire suspected it was his conscience that made him repeat it every time. She waited for the recitation, but Paul remained silent. Claire whispered, "I know," and touched his cheek with the back of her hand. Paul dropped his head and fiddled with his wedding ring. Coincidence? This is too much for one person, Claire spoke sternly into the air, hoping the words might reach someone in a position of power somewhere. What has he done to deserve all this? There was no response. Not even Nana appeared, although Claire knew in her heart she would have, had she persisted. Finally, Paul wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Get out," he said to himself. "Get out of the damn car!" His hand rested on the keys in the ignition for another minute. Finally, he got out and grabbed a shopping bag from the passenger seat, which contained several pairs of pajamas. When he closed the door, it didn't latch. He had to lean against it and bump it with his hip while he pressed his free hand against the door. "Damn it to hell," he cursed. He beat the door with the shopping bag until he was holding nothing but the paper handles. Nice. He bent down, gathered up the pajamas, and folded the bag around them, then dragged himself up to the double doors. "This has got to work, or he's going to come apart at the seams," Claire cried as she tore herself away from Paul and thought herself to Gus's side. "First and foremost, he needs to know you're still in there, Gus," she instructed her father-in-law, patting his arm and turning his face toward hers by his chin. Gus was strapped into a chair by the window with pillows propped up around him. His hair was damp and neatly combed. Claire felt hope bubble up inside her as she watched Gus frown and touch his chin right where her thumb and finger had rested. She took a deep breath as she sensed Paul around the corner. He paused in the doorway. Anxious to get busy, Claire didn't realize what he was doing, and then she remembered. He'd once confessed that from the doorway, before he saw his father's eyes, he could pretend everything was still fine for a minute or so. He could tell himself they were in Trinity Lutheran instead of a nursing home, and Gus was just recovering from minor surgery. He'd imagined they were going to talk about lawnmowers, politics, Gus's jackass neighbor Bernie, spraying pesticides. He'd said as long as he stared at the back of his father's head, everything was still okay. But once he caught sight of those vacant eyes, it all went to hell. It was kind of a cruel game to play with oneself, but she wasn't about to rob him of this, if it helped him cope or eased his pain in the slightest way. A pencil-thin young nurse in a Scooby-Doo smock breezed past Paul and chirped, "We're all crisp and clean for you today, Mr. Cummings." "Super," Paul mumbled under his breath. Claire thought she saw him mouth the words "go away," but he quickly followed it up with an audible, "He looks nice, thanks. We really appreciate all of you taking such great care of him. Here, I brought him some more pajamas." He held out the remains of the tattered bag. "Oh, he has plenty of PJs. No worries, though. I'll just put them in the closet," she said, taking what was left of the bag and tossing it all in a tall cupboard. "Buzz me if you need anything," she added and closed the door behind her. Claire gave Gus's arm a squeeze, and Paul wandered over to an empty chair next to him and collapsed into it. "Hey, Dad. It's me, Paul," he said, taking Gus's hand for a moment, then setting it down in his father's lap. "You look good. Clean shave." Gus's eyes remained fixed on the pond beyond the courtyard. Claire grimaced and paced. Paul sighed as he leaned back in his chair and stared at the same awful thing he always ended up staring at. The clock above the door. "Come on, Gus. I know you can do this," Claire pleaded. "Just tell him I said hi. Or something." She repeated the words like a mantra. "Tell him I said hi. You can do it. Tell him I said hi." She even tried pulling energy directly from the wall socket, but she couldn't decide what to do with it. She let it go and watched it swirl in the air above them for a second before it made a sound like a tick and winked out. "Feels like there's nothing to connect with, Gus. Last time you were singing, maybe you were giving off some kind of energy of your own," Claire reasoned. Utterly frustrated, she retreated. To think. She was so focused on the problem at hand, she didn't notice the space. She'd just created a quiet room out of necessity and hadn't given it much thought until she heard the knock. When she looked up, Claire found herself sitting on a white, cushy sofa in a small room. She turned toward the knocking sound and saw a turquoise door. The rest of the room was as white as a fresh ream of paper. There was one small window on the opposite side of the room, about 12 feet away. A second knock came from the turquoise door. "Claire?" said a voice from the other side. "Oh my God," Claire breathed. She jumped up, ran to the door, and whipped it open. Gus was standing there, arms outstretched with a grin so big his eyes were little more than slits. "Ha ha!" he shouted as he grabbed her face in his hands and kissed her cheek. "Gus," Claire cried, "how are you doing this?" "We're doing this," he corrected her. "I was afraid I could only pull this off with Lily. It was a long shot, but I thought I might find you." "Is Lily here too?" Claire asked. "No, she decided it best to let you figure this out on your own. She said it's hard for her not to interfere. But that's something she's working on." "I understand." Claire closed the door, linked her arm through Gus's, and led him to the sofa. They'd barely sat down when Claire blurted out, "So how do you take a message back for Paul?" She clasped her hands together beneath her chin, and they migrated to her lips as if in prayer. "Oh, geez, I sure want to. But it's a little tricky." "Well, you made it here, which means you could hear me. Just tell him you've spoken to me, nothing fancy. Tell him to find a man named Tony Chisholm at the Cook County Morgue, and gently, lovingly as you can, Gus. Believe me, I want to help. But it's like I go through a spin cycle or something on the way back, and Instead of losing a sock, I lose everything but the sock. I'm not like you. Traveling between planes is different when you're still tied to your body. I'll give it my best, but I can't make any promises. You know I'd do anything for you and Polly. I know, Gus, Claire said, her voice quivering. But I really believe we can do this. We have to. Did you see how much pain he's in? I can feel it. Gus looked troubled by this. As he adjusted the belt on his bathrobe, Claire cracked her knuckles. Between the two of us, we can make a believer out of him. Help me get through this. Help him get through this and find me. I know he heard my voice when he was with Anna, she continued, clutching at Gus's arm, practically begging. All right, then, let's give it a shot. Wish me luck, he said, getting up. He kissed her on the cheek again, and as he turned toward the door, Claire saw something odd. A ribbon-thin silver cord hung between his shoulder blades and trailed along behind him like an oxygen hose. Claire couldn't believe she hadn't noticed it when he'd come in. It had been at their feet the entire time. She hoped she hadn't stepped on it. Gus? Yeah, he said, turning to face her. What's with the cord? What, this? He said, lifting it with an index finger, which caused it to shimmer blue, purple, and pink like an oily puddle in a parking lot. Claire blinked and nodded. Helps me find my way back, that's all. Not stray too far, I suppose. Oh, right, Claire smiled. Gotta get back now. Okay, then just make it a good, strong pow of a message. Give it everything you've got and let me know when you're ready so I can be there too. I'll try. I'm so happy you're able to come here and visit Lily, that this is your real life and not what we see there. Claire choked up. Sorry, it's a lot to process. I know. Take your time. Say, there's a guy on his way to see you, so don't run off, Gus added as he reached the turquoise door and placed his hand on the knob. Who would know I'm here? I don't even know where here is half the time. Gus chuckled. Mixed-up folks like me know you're here. Double-timers, he replied before opening the door. Do I know any other double-timers? Well, you have a unique relationship with this one. He grinned and gave her a wink as he closed the door behind him, one last loop of it shimmering. One last loop of shimmering cord disappearing beneath it. Claire flopped back against the white cushions. Now that she was alone, the room smelled like the ocean. She took a deep, savory breath. She stood up and walked across the room to the small window, hoping with all her heart she'd see a pristine beach. When her eyes lit upon the waves rushing up the shore, she pressed her hands against the glass, closed her eyes, and thought, when I turn around, I want this room to be sunflower yellow, with white trim. I want all of Colin's paintings hanging on the walls. When she turned away from the window and opened her eyes, she knew she was standing in a dream house, just waiting to happen. The formerly plain white room had merely been a blank canvas.